If you can find a decently sized fan base for a video game, there's a high likelihood that mods have been created for that game. Player-made content is, whether the developers like it or not, incredibly common for most modern titles. Custom furniture, clothes, tools, and mechanics can slap a new coat of paint on a game you've played dozens of times, or just allow you to work around god-awful Willy Wonka-ass base game haircuts. For some, the ability to personalize gameplay is what makes or breaks an experience. Others may just want to kiss Robin with tongue. Either way, when we look at games with long lifespans and thriving communities years after launch, modders are often found at the core. While a lot of respected game studios do encourage the modding of their work, Nintendo is very much not one of them. In fact, some of their systems are specifically designed to prevent any tampering with their precious IPs. Workarounds are and have always been present. We all remember jailbroken 3DSs, but as time goes on, the company has become stricter and pointed over and over at game manipulation breaking their terms of service. Let me ask you a question though. Do you think that stopped anyone? Well, it didn't, and also it did. Let's talk about the interesting history behind Animal Crossing New Horizons modding. First, a quick disclaimer, I am not endorsing the use of modding, the breaking of Nintendo's TOS, or anything of the sort. All information in this video is readily publicly accessible. As we'll cover later, Nintendo isn't too keen on anyone discussing modding and tends to love asking creators to take their videos down. My personal Switch is not modded, and this is simply commentary on the subject. Basically, if I get an email with a strike on this video, I'm going to become evil. Anyway, that's all. Animal Crossing mods first reached a niche level of popularity with the community in New Leaf, as the series shifted to allow for more aesthetic-based gameplay. Although New Horizons is a massive jump up from New Leaf in terms of decorating, the previous installment did have some features that could be toyed with. In terms of mods, you may have memories of cherry blossom-filled towns year-round, odd-looking waterfalls, flowers in lakes, custom villagers, and off-putting camera angles. Most of these popular hacks were achieved with a New Leaf save editor on a homebrewed or jailbroken 3DS. A homebrewed 3DS, to put it simply, is a 3DS that has been hacked to bypass security features and allow custom software to run. This opens up a lot of new possibilities for the console. You can create custom themes, use it as an emulator, play region-locked games, and obviously modify games you own. More often than not, these programs are also used to pirate games, which isn't exactly legal. Homebrewed 3DSs are quite a common sight nowadays since the process isn't too hard and Nintendo is no longer supporting the console. Currently, the 3DS hacks subreddit has 140,000 members, which, if converted to dollars, would be around the price of the Switch 2, I think. Anyway, most of those popular New Leaf hacks were harmless and primarily visual, and therefore didn't fuck with the game's general functionality too much. Of course, there are risks when messing around with any save file, but the danger here was fairly low. There were also community-made mods to download that added custom villagers and furniture to the game. Many also use these hacks to unlock furniture, spawn items, and complete collections. Basically, just making things easier on yourself and making your town look cooler. Although hacking New Leaf and any other games as well as tampering with consoles in general is against Nintendo's terms of service, action was very rarely taken against modded towns during the game's lifespan. You technically could be banned if Nintendo was made aware of your save, but there are very few reports of this happening. There were a few bans, don't get me wrong, especially regarding the Dream Suite, but not a ton. With New Leaf being a mostly single-player game and mods not affecting the greater community's experience, we can assume busting waterfall makers was not a top priority. The New Leaf modding community is still active to this day, and you can find new works being published fairly often. That backstory primes us to move forward to the New Horizons era. At this point in the game, I think we're all acutely aware of just how astonishing ACNH's sales figures were. It will forever be remembered as a landmark title on the Switch and the spark that lit off a string of thousands of attempted recreations. It was also a full-on dive into the decorating waters New Leaf had dipped its toes into, pulling the series away from being a straight-shot life sim into a more creative territory. With a focus on making your island look its best and a limited amount of furniture and tools available to aid in that quest, New Horizons presented itself as an almost perfect base for modding. Community-made furniture, villagers, and cosmetics were almost a no-brainer for the sandbox style that the game employed. More detailed models and the ability to place furniture wherever you wanted made it a fitting slate to build upon, and build people did. Now, modding the Switch is a bit more of a complicated process than modding the 3DS. For starters, if your Switch is a newer model, you've already bet your house on the ponies and lost. Only version 1 unpatched Switches can be hacked, which were phased out in the summer of 2018. There are workarounds using a mod chip, but that usually requires the help of a professional. If you do happen to have an unpatched system, extra equipment is required, and it's still a lengthy task. In an effort to cover my own ass, that's the farthest I'm going to delve into the actual modifying process. I've never encountered a DMCA takedown notice, and I'd like to remain a copyright virgin. I'm saving myself for a really funny bit that requires a Universal Music song one day. Anywho, when we look at ACNH mods, we can split them into two main categories based on purpose. I'm going to be calling these categories personal use mods and distribution center mods for today. Personal use mods are those acquired by the player for use on their own island, like custom furniture, island foundation tweaks, clothing, and the like. Distribution mod is going to be the name for those seen on treasure islands, usually used to spawn in items for people to take or get hacked items to users who want them. If you somehow don't know what a treasure island is, it's a hub of spawned in items and materials that users can freely take. Some will feature hard to get resources like Nook Miles tickets in bulk, while others provide an easy way to get lots of furniture or clothing at once. Item buying outlets and treasure islands were some of the first ACNH mods to truly reach the community at large, plenty of them popping up within a few months of the game's initial release. There is a bit of tedium to regularly collecting and ordering items for builds in New Horizons, and that only increases when you're buying in bulk, so these services were and are popular. Back in the day, you could find listings on Etsy and eBay for treasure island reservations. These would be a flat fee that purchased you a set amount of time on the island where you could make as many trips back and forth as you wanted. Most of these listings are gone now as Nintendo began to snipe them on those platforms, but you can still find a few stragglers. Twitch channels and private Discord servers are another method, usually with some free islands available and some only accessible to those who pay a monthly fee. These are the more common ones now. When these islands first became available, many of them had a far more interesting stock than their modern equivalents. In addition to regular items spawned in for convenience, they also had hacked items, otherwise inaccessible in-game. The most infamous of these is undoubtedly the star tree. Like the name implies, these were trees with star fragments replacing the fruit. You could also find things like the fences, washboard, and clothesline from Harv's Island, and some pitfall seed trees too. These pieces could be brought back home to a player's own island and placed completely normally. No native hacking was required. Your island could be completely vanilla and still have these items. If you were on ACNH Twitter in 2020, you're likely intimately familiar with these little bastards. You're also probably aware of the day that Nintendo patched them out of the game, replacing them with regular trees, and all hell broke loose. If you'd like a more in-depth video on the drama surrounding that situation, Liz the Lass has an amazing video on it. Save me, Liz, save me. Unlike in the New Leaf era, Nintendo pounced on these hacked items specifically the moment they were made aware of them. This does, unfortunately, make sense since they were accessible to any player regardless of system configurations. However, they were cool and I miss them every day. In part, at the very least, this action was spurred on by one single person, a Pokemon YouTuber named Verlisify. Verlisify has had his fair share of public chaos that we do not have time to get into now, but in this situation, he directed his viewers to report modded islands to Nintendo, which then led to multiple modders being penalized due to the mass uproar. This was done through dream addresses and using the newly added report feature, which I'd like to remind you right now, these star trees caused zero issues for other players. This update also apparently began a bunch of attempts by Nintendo to stop treasure islands from functioning through various patches. There's little information on this, but since there are plenty of treasure islands still functioning, I don't think it worked. Star trees do remain a casualty. Sorry to our fallen soldiers. Personal use mods open up an entirely new, more intriguing can of worms. These mods do require a hacked switch to function, so the average person usually wasn't able to log on, download a couple things, and get cracking. One of the earliest content creators to show off mods and asset creation was Planet Clue, known as KK Clue at the time. They first began posting short, mod-focused videos in June of 2020, only 3 months after the game's launch. These videos garnered a hefty serving of views. You yourself may have been one of them if you were into ACNH at the time, which who wasn't? Most of his early content was under 7 minutes, showing simple model changes like Lucky without bandages and Isabel eating shit in the plaza. Been there, bitch. Literally earlier, actually, my face really hurts. Later, they started their mod makeover series, where he customized the original designs of villagers by fan request. In these videos, she mentioned using a file editor called Switch Toolbox to aid in mod creation, but nowadays this tool is no longer in development. That being said, we can see a lot of the modding process here, and the designs are awesome. I remember specifically the Kid Cat without his helmet mod going kinda bonkers bananas on Twitter and Instagram back in the day. Clue has since switched content, so the series has hit a lull, but it almost certainly sparked excitement for mods in the game's infancy. Despite their work kicking things off in 2020, modding did not gain much traction for mainstream content creators until mid to late 2022, nearly a year after the game's final update launched. That timing is no coincidence. Having a lack of content to look forward to and an entire cycle of seasonal events having passed twice, interest did begin to dwindle. We see other sandbox-style games like The Sims, Minecraft, and Stardew lengthen their lifespans massively by allowing the community to contribute to the game's features. Fans are never truly out of things to do as long as new mods are available to try out. Naturally, ACNH players decided to follow in those footsteps. Although the barrier of entry to modding was fairly high, many YouTubers in the New Horizons scene began uploading builds featuring all sorts of different mods, putting together lists for viewers to browse, and just generally giving the game a shiny new look. A good friend of mine, EJ from EJ Plays, actually put together an entire video of neat mods in one big 3.0 update style package. Big shout out to him for allowing me to mention their videos. Lots of big names in the ACNH community joined in to add some spice to their islands and reinvigorate the designing process. This had a pretty large impact on viewers as well. A lot of them went searching to find their own unpatched switches to mod. Showing off this new way to play was a wonderful spark for the community. Until it wasn't. On October 21st, 2022, Liz the Lass, who I conveniently mentioned earlier, posted a video titled "Nintendo Took Down My Videos." Liz had been creating modded content in tow with the rest of YouTube, and really good content at that, before Nintendo sent out copyright claims for 6 of her related videos. 2 of them were not claimed, but to be safe, she took those down of her own accord. No videos showcased how to mod the Switch in any capacity. I highly recommend you watch her video. I want her to be able to tell her own story with this situation, as it was her content that was affected. She wasn't the only one though. Nintendo did take down the 3.0 update video that EJ made as well. Nintendo was putting their foot down hard in a way that they truly hadn't with New Leaf. As I said before, Nintendo has pretty much always had an anti-modding stance and has policed mods in other series before, so that wasn't a total shock, but it was still disappointing. This large crackdown served to dim the modding hype down substantially, cutting the YouTube trend's lifespan very short. There are still some content creators consistently making mod content, but out of respect for them, I don't want to name anyone in case Nintendo is feeling trigger happy today. Many new projects are also still being posted on ACNH hacking forums, including a fairly large one coming out pretty recently. Technically, Nintendo is very much within their rights to do this, and the following notes are my own opinions. Yes, modding is against TOS, and again, I don't endorse it. However, Animal Crossing New Horizons was the perfect game to give modding support to, and I wish Nintendo had. Giving modders accessible tools to build on what ACNH arrived with would have dramatically improved the designing process. Making your island your own was the core of this installment, and it was limited by the furniture and features created by the developers. This is where modding really excels, and I can't help but see this as a major missed opportunity. Mods for this game were not cheating in the sense that they affected other players' experiences, which means that there wouldn't have been accusations of unfairness. If anything, that was felt with most Switch players not having the hardware to even attempt modding. LuxPlay, who is one of the amazing creators who contributed to the modding scene, had a video taken down for just talking about mods and modders, which calls a lot into question. Does Nintendo consider talking about and not even engaging in TOS breaking behavior a violation? And if so, If modding was channeled through Nintendo, they could choose what was and wasn't authorized, at least to some extent. It truly seems to me like a situation where moderation is better than banning, because people will find a way. There is no world where Nintendo can outright control modders, but they can control what's easily accessible if they decide to make it possible. ACNH could be a very different game right now if that ability was given to players, and I gotta wonder what it would be like. However you feel about modding, it was certainly an interesting time for the community, and it won't be quickly forgotten. Thank you so much for watching this video. That's all I have for you right now. I appreciate you loads. Thank you to all of my members. I really appreciate your support. Stay safe, stay wonderful, my friends, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.